program and some recent changes that we're implementing and possibly some changes that we might be implementing. You're going to hear from Brian Wirtz, our partner over at the DOT, on local aid and the process that the department goes through in terms of eligibility issues and ranking. Then you'll hear from our project manager, Melinda Roslin, about the application process and some of the review processes that you'll be going through, requisitions and stuff. And then at the end of this, we'll have a breakout session for whether it's finance question related, or it's finance, or it's operations. We'll be splitting into 3 different groups for the people here in 3 different rooms. For people on the webinar, you'll be able to join through Teams, any one of the 3. You know, you're not subject to stay in that. If you want to jump around, the links are on our website at njib.gov. I believe it's a banner going across the top, right, Daniel, that they can find fairly easily. As far as the presentation goes, George, is that available? People want to follow along in the webinar.
We can add it to the webinar.
You throw it in the chat?
Mm-hmm.
So for anybody that wants to follow us along, as we're doing the slides, George Roland, who is our COO, is going to put the link into the chat box. You can just click on that and pull it up and follow along. All right. So without further ado, it's not working. Do we run out of batteries or?
Okay.
There we go. You're controlling me. I like that. Okay. So with respect to the program, the Transportation Bank, you know, relatively new. We got up and running in 2018, so almost 5 years ago to today. Our statute was amended to allow us to work with our partners over at the Department of Transportation to get a transportation bank up and running that was very similar to the 30-odd year program that we've successfully run with the DEP for the New Jersey Water Bank. We set the program up in a way that mirrors local aid's review process. So engineers and technical folks, if you haven't been through our program, it is almost identical to the local aid process in terms of concurrence of award and the things that you have to do with respect to getting the transportation project certified in the program. On the financing piece, we set it up like the water program with a short-term construction loan that leads into a long-term construction loan, bond counsel. So financial advisors, bond counsel should be very familiar because it mirrors literally what we do on the water bank side. So again, we're really trying to just make this as familiar and easy as possible for people that have never been in the program. So why use the Transportation Bank? You know, just like in real estate, 3 words. But this time it's budget, budget, and budget. So when we're talking to eligible borrowers, uneligible projects, and again, the people that follow me will get into those in more detail. But you're going to get a portion of your loans at 0% interest. These are the funds that come from the state through the department on their Transportation Trust Fund. It gets allocated to the iBank to be used for this program. So those lower costs, that can save your budget, and you just don't have to raise taxes. Or you can use those savings on other line items, general budget line items. Or, and we see this often, people use the savings and they go down their wish list and add another project or 2 that they otherwise would not have been able to finance in that current budget year. The way that we've set our loan program up is it is first and foremost a short-term loan, and then after a short-term loan, we finance you through a long-term loan. So the short-term construction loan program is set up. If you want to finance planning and design, your engineering costs, we do allow those expenses as eligible financing expenses. And it is awarded on ranked projects, and again, Brian Wirtz will get into the ranking methodology that Commissioner Scacchetti has set up, but it's on a readiness determination, right? So when your eligible project is ready to get to construction award, we back it up from there, and there is, and I don't want to steal Melinda's thunder, but we'll look at that and allow you to be allocated funds and then close a short-term loan. It is 3 years for the 3 full fiscal years for the length of your construction project, and an additional 2 years if you want to finance planning and design. So you have as much as 5 full fiscal years to finance your transportation program. This does not include transit, but it includes pretty much everything else. And again, when it comes to project eligibility, Melinda Roslin will go into that a little bit more. As far as the short-term loan program goes, we only charge you interest on the funds that you've drawn. So typically what will happen, you'll come in for a $5 million project, let's say. $500,000 of that will be for engineering, planning, and design, right? And you want to finance it. So you come in and we certify that your engineering contract is eligible. You can come in and we'll close a short-term loan for you, with you for the whole $5 million, right? The engineer's estimate for that, the entire cost of that project. We only make available to you those components that have been certified as they get certified. So in this case, you've got a certification for $500,000 of engineering expenses. You've got a $5 million loan, you've got access to $500,000 of that $5 million, right? And as you draw on that $500,000 to pay your engineer, your consulting engineer, then what we do is we start charging you interest on that. We set the interest rate monthly. It is approximately 50% of the one-year Treasury bill. I think the last time I looked at Treasuries yesterday or Monday, one-year Treasuries were 4.5%. So right now, if we had to reset our rate, we'd reset it around 2.25. But again, right now the current rate's around 2.5, which is marginally lower than where you would borrow bands. But the key here is when you borrow money on a bond anticipation note, you start being charged interest on the entirety of that note from day one. Here, you're borrowing $5 million. You have $500,000 available to you. We only charge you interest on the amount of that $500,000 that you've drawn. When your construction contract gets certified, then you get access to the remainder of that $500 million loan. I'm sorry, that $5 million loan, and you get to then draw against the whole $5 million. If you have 2 contracts instead of just one, as each contract gets certified, we allow you to draw off of the amount on that certification. So we differ a little bit from the local aid grants in that you have access to 100% of the funds up front, again, as soon as that component is certified, although we do require invoices in order for you to draw against the loan, right? You do not have to pay the cost, you just have to incur them. So you have an eligible pre-qualified expense, you endure that expense, you send us the supporting documentation, the invoice electronically, we approve it, we send the cash out to your bank account for those funds. And it's not just for construction. Again, you can see up here, it's general cost allowance, so you can also borrow money to pay your engineer, your architect, your bond counsel, financing costs, right? So it's a little bit more expansive than what you might possibly be able to pay for under local aid grants. Obviously, it is a loan, not a grant, so certainly to the extent that you can get grants, you want to make sure that you chase those funds. When your construction project is complete, that's when we take you out to long-term financing. Let's say you're doing a bridge project and it's going to take more than 3 years. So we have the ability in our statute to clear out the amount of funds that you've drawn with us and give you a long-term loan for that amount, and then give you a residual short-term loan for another 3 years for the remaining expenses that you have yet to endure. That's funny, I was going to say next page, and it's me. Okay, long-term loan program. So statutorily, we can go out to 31 years. So it is the lesser of the useful life or 31 years. You do not have to comply with the local bond law where they've got that matrix dependent on the thickness of the mercadium, the supporting structure, et cetera, that you're allowed to take a loan out for X years. Our statute specifically says, notwithstanding any other law to the contrary, the maximum term of these loans is the lesser of the useful life as certified by your consulting engineer or 31 years. That's as far as we can go out. The interest on it, we've got a couple of different programs set up here. If you have, and this is relatively new, if you have a loan a term that you want to borrow for 10 years or less, so your useful life is 9 years, perfect. 75% of your money will come in at 0%, and the other 25% you get from our cost of funds. So you get a blended rate of what our all-in AAA borrowing rate is at the iBank, and the other 75% at 0%. So it comes out to be 25% of our all-in rate. Our base program is the remainder of the project. So if you're borrowing funds, your useful life is longer than 10 years, you want to borrow funds for more than 10 years, that's our base program. That's where you get 50%, a blended rate of 50% of our all-in market rate, which the way to think about that is you're going to get half your funds at 0% and half your funds at our all-in AAA rate. We did a deal in December of 2022, and our blended rate was just a little bit less than 3%. And I think rates at the time for AAA borrowers were right around 5% for 30-year paper, okay? We are looking to convert some of our current projects right now that are in short-term financing that are about construction complete sometime within the next 2.5 months. So we will do that before the end of this fiscal year. Very new to this coming year, we have set up a bill match program. I can't say it's done yet because we still have to go through the legislative process. Our probes and our May report are going to be submitted to the legislature within the next 4 weeks, but certainly we're going through the process. The number of people that have had to sign off on this program already have. For disadvantaged communities that apply to US DOT for a competitive bill grant, and you get that grant, and those grants are typically 80% of the total cost of the project. If you are a disadvantaged and overburdened community as defined by the way Commissioner Scacchetti has defined disadvantaged communities, you can come to us for that other 20% match that the bill requires, and we will lend those funds to you at 0% for the term of the loan, okay? Next. All right, so this is a pretty recent real-life example of how the savings, getting 25 or 50% of our all-in blended cost at our AAA rate, so you're basically getting 50 or 75% of your funds at 0%. So on a 10-year loan, you get 75% at 0%, right? If you're a AA2 borrower and you get 25% of your funds at you get a blended rate of what 25% of our AAA rate would be. If you went out and borrowed funds at your own, we estimate that on a $5 million loan, at the end of the day, you would end up spending just about $6,200,000. If you come through the program and you just borrow funds from us and you end up paying 25% of the AAA rate, again, which right now, if we did, so it would have been in December, it would have been around 1.4%. It's probably, 0.1, 0.2% less than that. So you're going to be around 1.25% right now. You'll end up spending around $5.5 million. So it's a savings of around, what is that? How much? 17%. Yeah, 17%, though. I was looking for the actual number. It looks like it's around $700,000. Right? So 17% projected cost savings. Now, what we recommend is a lot of you end up getting local aid grants, right? So combine your local aid grant with iBank financing, with Transportation Bank financing, and here's the difference. If you get a 20% local aid grant and you self-fund the rest, right? That 20% grant saves you from 6.2 down to 4.9. It saves you about $1.3 million, right? 25%. But if instead of borrowing the remaining 80% through your own bond program, you come in through the Transportation Bank and borrow the 80% at this discounted rate, this is your best deal. You end up paying $4.37 million back instead of 6.196 or even 4.9 million. So your all-in savings is around 36%. So it's like getting two grants. You get a grant from DOT and their local aid program, and you get a grant from the Transportation Bank on the interest side with the 0% funds. So to anybody out there that gets a local aid grant and you're thinking of financing the residual, come finance the residual through the Transportation Bank. If you're thinking about doing any transportation project at all, whether or not you get a local aid grant, please come through us, because you can see that you're going to get, close to a 17% grant. Next, let's go to a 20-year loan. And that's, we certainly see a number of 20 years. We don't see that many 30 years. I think we've done 2 bridges, George? 2 bridges so far, right, that might qualify. But outside of those 2 bridges, most of the projects that we do either are somewhere between 10 and 20 years useful life. So now we're looking at a 20-year, so we're back to the base program where you're going to get half of the AAA rate, right? If you do it without a local aid grant and you do it on your own, you end up paying $7.6 million over 20 years. But if you come through the Transportation Bank, it only costs you $6.5. So you're saving a little bit more than $1.1 million on a $5 million loan. 23% savings, 23% grant by a reduction in interest cost. Now let's say you combine it with a DOT local aid grant, right? Finance the 80% on your own. It's $6.1 million, certainly better than 7.6, like if you didn't do anything, right? So you end up with a 31% saving over just independent financing. So grants are great. Grants are great. Best money there is. But even better than grants are grants plus discounted loan for the residual. And you can see on that 4th bar chart, if you borrowed that 80% through the Transportation Bank, the all-in cost would be just $5.2 million. Basically, you're spending $200,000 on interest at the end of the day, when all the free money from DOT and the free interest from the Transportation Bank. 49% projected savings compared to going it on your own. This program is the cheapest source of funds for your Transportation Bank projects. I'm sorry, for your transportation projects, okay? Please keep that in mind. Fees. We get this question every time. Okay, so what's it going to cost me? Very similar to the water bank. There's a 2% loan origination fee. You pay 1% at the time of your short-term loan closing, but you don't come out of pocket for it. The iBank actually lends you the funds. So let's say on that original $5 million loan, you got $500,000 in engineering expenses. Your first invoice is $100,000. When you close the loan, you want to get paid that $100,000 on the same day. We actually lend you 1% of $5 million, which is going to be 50 grand. 50 grand? Yeah, 50 grand, right? So you're going to get a requisition for $150,000, right? You get $100,000, and the iBank puts the $50,000 towards the 1% fee. And then when you term out to long-term financing, that's when the second 1% is due. We make it part of your first debt service payment, right? So we'll take $50,000 out and apply that towards the loan origination fee once we long-term finance you. There is for people that are involved in a bond deal, if we finance you through a bond deal, there is a one-time 10 basis point cost of issuance fee. Anybody that's ever issued bonds, if you can get out of paying, less than 3/4 of a point, 0.75%, with all of the fees that are included in loan closing. So what happens is the iBank actually subsidizes all the rest of those long-term financing fees, but we do charge 10 basis points, 0.1% to the borrower. There's also a 17 basis point annual fee, but we take up to 2.02%. So 2 basis points of that 17 basis points actually go into a fund that we're dedicating to provide technical assistance to disadvantaged communities. So over time, this will grow the more loans we issue, but we're going to be taking those funds and we're going to be paying consulting firms to go into disadvantaged communities and help them with strategy, help them with public outreach so that their public understands what they're doing, help them with engineering design, right? So basically, while we are collecting it, we're giving it back. Eligibility requirements, just go through this really quickly. Local government units, right? Anybody that is a county or a municipality, you're all certainly authorized to own and operate transportation systems, roads, bridges, et cetera. But we also allow any political subdivision in the state or a transportation authority or like a regional transportation authority that's also authorized to construct, operate, or maintain public highways. So basically, if you're a local government unit, you're an eligible borrower. As far as project eligibility, Brian Wirtz is going to handle that in his next section. I won't steal his thunder. Go quickly into the borrowing process. So your applications, you can submit them at any point in time, right? What we do is we have funds that we allocate quarterly. In fact, next Monday, April 3rd, we will be looking to allocate our next round. So you're going to come in, and the most you would wait in order to be allocated, if you were project ready, would be at most 90 days, right? We'll get you on the project priority list. We'll get you allocated, and we can work on closing a short-term loan with you. Application forms are submitted through our portal, njmoves.com. It is set up to be similar to H2 Loans, which is on the water side. I will tell you we don't have near the functionality at this point. It's much younger. It still needs to be built out a lot, but there is still some functionality, especially in terms for the application process. Melinda will go through that process with you when she gets up here. So the next thing you do is the technical process. So the DOT reviews every single project for ranking and then for compliance, and then the iBank manages obviously the application as well as the financing piece. There is a legal process that's involved, so we want to make sure that your ordinances and your resolutions, your public notice is all in place. We are our bond counsel, who is Chiesa, Shahinian, and I always call him just CSG, and Giantomasi, right? That's our bond counsel. So your bond counsel will be working with either Tricia or Dorit to make sure that you're compliant with all the public finance law. And then as far as the credit process, it's pretty straightforward. You've got to be investment grade rated. There are some issues if you're not investment grade rated on how we can help you either get there, or there are a couple of workarounds. This is all laid out in our credit policy. If you've got any questions about the credit policy, you can certainly feel free. It's online. Just go to our website, go to the search bar, type in credit policy, click the little, whatever it is, magnifying glass. It'll pull up the policies, and you can go down and you can find the credit policy and read through it. Or you can always call and ask for our CFO, Lauren Kaltman. She'll be happy to walk you through it. Yeah, you're on spot. And then there is a DLGS process. You check a box, or your bond counsel really checks the box when they're filling out the financial addendum form. And what that does is it gives the green light to the iBank to work on your behalf. We, on a weekly basis, are putting either water projects or transportation projects in front of Jacqueline Suarez, who's the director over at the local finance board. We're putting it in front of her and her team. She's got access to our systems, and she just checks them off and approves them, right? So again, there's very limited lift for people going through DLGS. The one kind of upside for this is, if you're financing bond issuance on your own, you typically have to put the 5% down payment up so that they are comfortable, they being DCA, are comfortable that you have the funds to afford this. There's an automatic waiver of that 5% since we loan 100% of the funds. So, you get out of that 5% down payment. And sometimes that really helps. We've had a couple of borrowers that were grateful that they didn't have to put that 5% up. Going through the credit policy very, very briefly, it's our underwriting guidelines, right? It really limits our ability to make exceptions. So while half of our program is really focused on our borrowers, the other half of our program is focused on the people that give us the funds. And those people are the bond investors, right? And so they've got rating agencies that look at us and put a rating on our bonds. They look at the underlying collateral, they look at our structure, they look at the way the iBank actually manages and services those bonds. So all three of those components are very important to the rating agencies. The biggest one is the underlying collateral. So we have an underwriting policy called our credit policy, and what is our capability to do exceptions? Because exceptions can be fatal for programs. You know, if you allow everybody and their brother and sister into the program as an exception, you really don't have an underwriting policy. What the credit policy does is it's a policy that's approved by our board. It limits, it actually cuts off. I have no flexibility. Lauren Kaltman has no flexibility to approve people that do not meet our credit policy, right? And that's a very positive thing when the rating agencies come and look at our program and provide us with AAA ratings, which gives us the lowest cost of funds available at any given point in time. So we want to maintain that AAA rating into perpetuity, and having a credit underwriting tool that eliminates exceptions is one of the keys to making sure that we maintain that AAA rating. The state also adopted its policies for both the water and the transportation bank funds that we have. So I know it says just water up there. That's kind of a misprint. It should also say transportation. A couple of quick highlights. We are looking for a general obligation pledge from all of our borrowers. That's pretty straightforward, since the transportation bank really only lends to local government units, municipalities, and counties. To the extent that we did a conduit loan where a county or municipality provided a GO on behalf of, let's say, a redeveloper. There was a component in there and the county wanted to backstop that. We would make a loan with the county, and the county would have to transfer those funds to the redeveloper, and I won't get into the process that's involved. It's fairly complicated and deep, but again, what we're looking for is a general obligation from the local government unit to really protect the program from losses. Investment grade rating, I talked about that. There is an exception for, you know, folks that are lower rated. We will take the Municipal Qualified Bond Act. You can also go out and get a bank LOC. I will tell you, in the 12 plus years I've been here, I've never seen anybody provide us with an LOC. There's a minimum, I think, single A rating on the bank that provides that. And there's also de minimis loans, so loans that are very, very small. You can come in, but there is a review. There's certain metrics that you have to meet in terms of leverage, in terms of liquidity, and in terms of debt service coverage. Anybody that comes in that has a rating less than BBB plus or Baa1 from Moody's, if you have a Baa2 or a Baa3 or otherwise from S&P and Fitch, BBB or BBB minus, you've got to get a second rating. So as long as you got BBB plus or Baa1, you only need one rating. If you've got less than that, and you're still investment grade, you have to get a second one, and that second, you cannot have a non-investment grade rated. Anything that's BB plus or less excludes you from the program. Again, but then we look to the Municipal Qualified Bond Act fund to work with you, okay? Like I said, we do conduit loans for redevelopment projects. Too complicated and long to get in here. If you're interested in that, give me a call. And if you've got loans outstanding in the program in excess of $2 million, you have to maintain your credit rating. There is a $150,000 minimum loan requirement. And again, this isn't so much for us as it is for you folks. Anything less than $150,000, it's really hard to justify coming into the program and the cost that you might incur, because it's going to be hard for you to make up that in the savings that we provide if it's less than $150,000. I think this is my last slide. Frequently asked questions. Aren't interest rates from other lenders' programs better? If there's something out there, please let me know, because if we can match it or work something around, I'm not saying that we can because we're statute driven since we're a state authority, but I'd love to know how people can provide funds, unless, you know, there's a specific grant program available for that agency or that authority for that particular time, for that particular project. I don't think there are programs out there that systematically offer better financing than what the department and the iBank can offer through the Transportation Bank. 50 to 75% of a loan, like I said, is basically interest-free, and short-term rates are more competitive in comparison to bands. On top of that, you've got principal and interest payments that do not commence during your short-term loan program. So from a budgetary perspective, we're not looking for you to pay us back until we go to long-term conversion, right? And that's very healthy in terms of getting you through the construction period, getting the project done and stood up, and then you start owing the repayment for that project back. What if my community has enough cash on hand to self-fund? So I would say, that's great. I would certainly encourage people to consider us for working capital, right? Given the way that we charge interest and the advantageous level that we offer relative to market rates that are out there, if I was a CFO or I was on a council or a mayor of some community, I would certainly be looking every year. I've got $5 million that I'm doing in transportation projects. I'm going to give them to the Transportation Bank, and I'm just going to keep rolling it. So I'll borrow at any given point in time $5 million at this discounted rate. And look, if you can invest money that you're sitting on instead of using your own cash to pay vendors, use our cash, and if you can invest it and make more than our 2.5% rate for a year and just earn arbitrage the interest, there's nothing illegal about that, right? But again, to the extent that you've got additional expenses that you didn't anticipate incurring, you have the option to either pay us off with your own funds at the end of construction or take it out as a long-term loan. It can be a very efficient financial tool for your CFOs to manage their budgetary constraints. Is it beneficial for my town to take out a loan for a small project? And I'll let Melinda talk about that a little bit, but yes, so what we'll do is we've got one borrower in particular, I think we've got 4 loans with them right now, right? 4 road paving projects, and kind of like the example I just gave, they keep rolling another project and then another project and then another project. And what we do is when those projects are close enough, we combine them into one loan. So you save at long-term financing, you save legal costs on financing a couple of projects into one loan in long-term. But again, they're just using this program to continually resurface portions of their township. It's a very efficient way to manage their cash flows. And I believe that is, yes, that's it for me. There's my contact information if anybody needs to get a hold of me. Do we have time for any questions, or you want me?
Yes. I'll start with the online question. Can you choose a maturity shorter than the useful life of your project?
Absolutely. So I would tell you, both Lauren and I, as finance folks, we generally tend to hate risk, which is interesting for finance people to not like risk. So if we've got communities out there that want to borrow shorter than the useful life, and it's going to cost you obviously a little bit more in your debt service, but to the extent that you can handle it in your budget, you'll save interest costs, right? Because you're shortening the amount of time that you're going to have funds out there that are costing you interest. At the end of the day, it's going to cost you less money overall, and that's great for your budget and great for your townsfolk. So absolutely, if you want to pay it off shorter, we just can't go longer.
Is COI charged even if the iBank does not do a bond deal in a particular year?
Yes.
Okay, my CFO was saying yes, it is. Because we anticipate that we may in the future. So again, if you're finance folks, you can appreciate this. We have a trust indenture that's set up, a general trust indenture, and we take all of the long-term loans that we make, and we put them into this indenture. And then when the indenture gets enough loans in it, we'll turn around and do a bond deal against it. So at some point, your loan will be part of a long-term financing, whether it's on the day or maybe 2 years after we make you a long-term loan.
That's it for the online question.
Any questions from anybody in the audience? All right, so then we're going to go to Brian Wirtz from the department. Great, that's it. Thanks, Brian.
All right, thank you, David. All right, so, yes, okay. So my name is Brian Wirtz. I work with the Department of Transportation in the Local Aid and Economic Development Division. And I'm going to go over the rating and ranking methodology quickly here for the program. So as David had touched on, and I think Melinda may expand on, the IBank, one of the IBank's roles in the process is determining borrower eligibility, whereas NJDOT and local aid, we determine project eligibility. And project eligibility is based on what is eligible under the legislation that created the IBank. So we look to legislation as part of the Transportation Trust Fund for guidance on projects that are eligible and the type of activities that are eligible. There's two definitions up here now: public highway, transportation project. I won't read these to you, but they are rather broad and cover a lot of items and activities. There's plenty of other definitions as well, but these two are the main ones where we draw our guidance from in terms of what projects are eligible and what kind of activities are eligible. That being said, as David had mentioned, the program has been set up to be very similar to our local aid program. So a good rule of thumb that we typically say is if the project is eligible for state aid from our local aid program, it's eligible for a transportation loan through the IBank program. Oh, wrong way. There we are. So once project eligibility is determined, activities that are determined to be eligible for that the project is proposing, we move on to our second role in the beginning steps of the program, which is our rating and ranking of the projects and applications. So currently we have 5 asset categories that you're able to apply under for the program. Bridge assets, multimodal. Multimodal is broken into 2 subcategories of pedestrian improvements and bikeway improvements. And we have road assets, congestion relief, and our newest addition to the categories is our freight asset. And just as a FYI, all the information that I'll be providing in these slides and moving forward for the rating and ranking methodology is all available to you to look at any time. And if you want to get into a little more depth or more specifics on the latest iteration of the January report, which is published every January for the IBank, and that's available on the NJIB website. So moving on. So first up, bridge assets. Category titles are a little self-explanatory, but for bridge asset projects, basically we're looking at projects and programs with a primary focus on preserving, rehabilitating, or reconstructing existing bridge structures. So again, we're thinking bridge rehabilitations, construction of brand new bridges. We had a project of demolishing a bridge. And for that category, the rating criteria, bridges are rated out of a 25-point rating scale. And we consider the project type, whether it's a replacement, rehabilitation, or if it's a project that has to deal with a culvert. We can consider the structure type, if it's through girder movable, if it's a different type of structure, or if it's a culvert. We take into account the structural sufficiency rating, which is supplied to us by the applicant during the application process. The status of the bridge, again, if it's open or closed or load posted, and the area of the structure if it's located on the National Highway System, or NHS. Next up is multimodal assets. So like I had mentioned, this is broken up into 2 subcategories. We have projects that address improvements in and/or provisions for alternate modes of transportation, including goods movement, bicycle pedestrian accommodations, and intermodal connections. So we'll go through the 2 rating criteria for the 2 subcategories here. So rating criteria for pedestrian projects. Again, we look at project type. Is this construction of new facilities, new pedestrian facilities? If it's a combination of new and rehabilitating some existing facilities or resources, and if this is strictly a rehabilitation project. We take into account the type of use, this is the area where the project is located, where the resource is located at. If it's a mixed use area, commercial, or if it's a residential area. And safety is a big one. You'll see that in all of our asset categories for all of our rating criteria. So if we take into account safety, in this case pedestrian safety. If the project is improving school access, the designation, including a transit village designation or complete streets policy in place. Second one is bikeway, the type of facility, if it's separated or partially separated from motor vehicle traffic, if this is going to be a new facility, or if we're rehabilitating an existing or adding to an existing. If we're adding additional mileage, we want to know how much additional mileage for the bikeway. The designation, again, complete streets or transit village. And if the proposed facility will be part of an element of a larger plan, if it's within the county or with maybe a larger regional plan with spanning multiple counties, or just a larger plan within your specific township or borough or LPA. Next up is road assets. This is a rather popular option. Road assets projects with a primary focus on preserving, rehabilitating, or reconstructing existing assets. These you would think of your typical mill to pave to projects. It could be curb to curb, it could be include curb or sidewalking as well. And the rating criteria for the road assets. Once again, safety is important to us. This would include pedestrian safety. If the facility is located on the NHS, designation again, transit village or complete streets. We take into account the average daily traffic on the existing facility. Pedestrian improvements, again, safety, like we said, is important, so pedestrian improvements there. And if you are a municipality, we'll take into account how many or if you've received municipal aid grants in the most recent round of municipal aid announcements or allocations, and if you're a county, we'll take a look at your county aid expenditure. All right, congestion relief. This category is projects focused on improving quality of life by maintaining or increasing movement of people and goods. Once again, safety. If it's located on the NHS, designation, transit village, complete streets, and the average daily traffic, ADT. And finally, our newest, it's old news now, but our newest category of the 5 asset categories is our freight assets, and this is projects and programs with primary focus on preserving and improving pavement conditions in support of truck traffic. So think kind of interchanges or projects within the vicinity of ports or other economic nodes. And project type, again, if it's truck safety and mobility, or if it's new construction. This is improving access to, like I had mentioned, access to economic centers and economic development. We take into account the overall effect that the project is proposed to have. Safety, again, if it's located on the NHS, average daily traffic, and specific for this category, as you'd expect, average daily large truck volume on the asset. So that kind of sums up our rating criteria on our asset categories. So like I said, our NJDOT's roles in these early stages of your application and project is our project ratings. That's what we just went through. Project eligibility, which will assess your project description as you've supplied in your application. And the next steps following those are the actual project ranking. Projects are rated, they'll be ranked against each other and put into rank order. And this list is what we call a preliminary priority list, and that's compiled by NJDOT Local Aid. That's provided to the IBank. The IBank overlays their readiness criteria and additional criteria that Melinda will get into in a minute. And the resulting list is the final priority list which is then provided to the legislature on a quarterly basis. You also hear it called as our quarterly priority list. And Melinda will get into a little more specifics for that item as well. And with that, that sums up my section here. So if we have any questions at the moment for our rating and ranking.
Just give everyone a minute.
Sure.
Doesn't look like it. Not at the moment.
All right. Thank you very much. Move on to Melinda.
Thanks, Brian. Okay, so next up, we're going to get into operational and application processes. Our project manager, if anybody's ever touched base with the Transportation Bank at the iBank, you've most likely spoken to Melinda. Melinda is a wealth of information on really getting into the weeds, exactly what folks need to do in order to stay compliant and get through the process as efficiently as possible. So without further ado, Melinda Roslin.
Hello. As David said, I'm the project manager here for the Transportation Bank. I'm the day-to-day contact for everything operations in transportation. So, all right, I've never actually worked this. Oh, I got it. Okay. So first, we're going to go through eligibility requirements, kind of the logistics of the application process. If you're familiar with the water bank, it's very similar. With just a few differences. So starting with eligibility, David reviewed our borrower eligibility, and as Brian said, it must be a transportation project as far as project eligibility. The only other requirement to come into the program is that the project in question can't have already been awarded construction or advertised for construction. So if you're in the design process, you have not yet advertised, this project is eligible to come into the program for financing. All right, and as David mentioned, our application portal is NJ Moves, NJ-Moves actually, and this is what our landing page looks like to log in. So there is the number to call to create an account. And then, once you have an account created, you can assign an authorized representative who can then in turn create and submit the project application. Can also assign roles and responsibilities to other collaborators such as bond counsel and consulting engineers and folks like that who can also assist with the creation of the project.
So, Melinda, 609-219-8601 to establish an account.
Yep.
In NJ Moves, right, so that they can submit information about the project.
Right.
Are they asking for anybody specifically at that number?
That's Mary's number.
So they should call that number and ask for Mary Pearsall.
Mary Pearsall. Mary Pearsall. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
She will get us set up. Okay. So next we move on to project ranking. Once the project has been submitted into NJ Moves, we normally hold an application meeting, and that will have all parties. Usually the iBank is there. Brian graces us with his attendance, and then usually financial representative from the sponsor, as well as engineers, bond counsel, whomever you see fit to have the meeting. Kind of go through the project, go through the program, make sure that it's a good fit for the program, and then it will be ranked among the other projects in the program. So, Brian already reviewed the base ranking for each asset category. So once that is done, the iBank will apply additional bonus points, and that's anywhere from 25 to 100 points additional to put the project on the list. And so, you've got your preliminary credit approval that David spoke about, the application meeting, whether or not we have all of the documentation required to determine the eligibility, that'll give you your bonus points, your initial bonus points. Now, once you're already on the list, as you progress through the life of your project, Each quarter, we publish this project priority list, and the projects are re-ranked. So once a project has come in, once you have an allocation, you get an additional points, and then once you close on a short-term loan, you get even more additional points. And the purpose of that is so that, a project that is already kind of underway does not ever fall beneath a project that is coming in new. So a bridge project might have higher base ranking, but, if you're a road and your shovels are already in the ground, you're never going to fall beneath that bridge project because you're getting those additional points as you move through the program. All right, that moves us on to funding allocation. David touched on that a little bit. Allocation is basically just the commitment of program funds to the applicant for a project. A little bit different from the water program. The water program does not allocate funds. We are a newer program with a limited amount of funds, so we really want to save those funds for projects that are, nearing construction, that are kind of ready to get in the ground. That's what we want to commit to. So the allocation is occurring at the beginning of each quarter. So we will be doing this allocation, pretty soon, next week, the week after, officially. And to be eligible for the allocation, your project must be kind of anticipated to receive that concurrence of construction award from the New Jersey DOT. Most projects within 12 months of allocation. So for bridge projects, because they are kind of longer in design, et cetera, you do get 24 months from allocation to receive that concurrence of award from the DOT. For our roles and responsibilities, I'm kind of go over the partnership between the DOT and the IBank. The DOT is responsible for all of the technical reviews. So the review of the design, so plans and specifications, Brian reviews those, provides comments on plans and specs to make sure everything is in compliance. We do have an environmental review, and that is to make the EO 215 determination. Most of our projects, I will say, are exempt from any kind of environmental deep dive review. Most of them in kind, replacements, that kind of thing. So most are exempt, but we do have to go through the review to make sure. And then we do get a small business enterprise goal percentage from the Division of Civil Rights. That's going to be based on your engineer's estimate of costs for each contract within the project. So we will submit your estimate on your behalf to the Division of Civil Rights, who will then in turn turn around and give you a goal that needs to be included in your spec when you go out to advertise. And then once you've gone through the advertisement process, construction award, Brian again reviews the construction bids, your certifications, et cetera, to give concurrence. The IBank, operational and financial responsibility. So as we've mentioned, credit and local finance board, we do maintain the application system, NJ Moves. We handled contract certification. So as you're bringing your contracts in, whether they be engineering or construction, David is the person certifying those contracts. And then we handle, obviously, the requisition disbursement of the funds from those certified contracts, short and long-term loan closing, and then obviously just the process support throughout the life cycle of the project, and that's me for the most part. All right, so getting into the application process itself, this is within NJ Moves. The initial submission, very light lift, usually takes less than 10 minutes to just get your information in there. It's contact information for the project sponsor or the applicant, your description of the project as detailed as you have it at the time, a map of the location, your estimated costs for the entirety of the project, and then your kind of estimated project timeline. And then we will turn around, determine the eligibility, the creditworthiness, the ranking, and the application meeting that we kind of, we talked about quite a bit so far. Excuse me, in the presentation. So a project will be placed on the PPL after this process, and it will stay there on the PPL until such time that it is eligible and ready for the allocation. So, the applicant can feel free to update the costs, the description, the timeline, any of those things within the application up until such time that you do receive the allocation. So, even if you have a project that is, kind of in the design phase or the planning phase and you don't really know for sure what your timeline or your costs are going to be, you have an opportunity to make those updates, within the system. So you're not kind of held to the first initial submission. All right, so next step, technically, is the finance piece. Now, this step can happen next, depending on whether or not you're financing engineering costs, or it can happen later when you get to construction. But either way, this is what happens prior to short-term loan closing. You're going to be submitting your financial information, and your bond counsel can assist in filling out that form on NJ Moves. That's when you would be submitting your executed engineering contracts, if they're applicable. And so we'll determine, if your credit and certify the applicable contract, and then proceed to loan closing. And as David mentioned, we close on the short-term loan for the total estimated cost of the project, and then just make available for draw those funds which have been certified via the contract. All right, so once your project is designed, you want to get ready to advertise for construction. So, you'll be submitting through NJ Moves your sealed plans, your specs, any permits if applicable. We do have a design certification that Brian requires, and then your engineering estimate. So DOT is going to review all of those things. They're going to give us that EO215 determination. They're going to distribute the SBE goal percentage, and then, once we have all of those things in place, the program will issue an authorization to go ahead and advertise that contract. And this happens if you have multiple contracts. This is going to happen each time. So as you get new contracts coming in for construction, you'll go through the same process. Oh, and I do want to mention that the review that Brian is doing on the plans and specs, this satisfies any of your technical review. If you were to have a local aid grant for the contract in question, it's not two separate reviews. This one review satisfies both. Okay. So after you've advertised, you've gotten your bids, you will submit those to us through NJ Moves, your bids, your contract, and your award resolution, which is going to be, subject obviously to the concurrence. But you get that first, and then the program will issue concurrence of award, and then once that happens, we can certify that particular construction contract. And if your loan is already closed, we make these costs available for draw, and if the loan has not been closed, if you're not financing engineering, that's when you would also do your financial form and prepare for short-term closing based on the construction contract. Papers are stuck together. All right, so this slide is just an overview of everything I just said kind of in one place. So, if you do have this presentation, it's kind of like a one-stop shop to just kind of look through how it goes, the flow from start to finish. So not much for me to speak to on that slide. And then we get to everyone's favorite is the disbursement model. So, you've got certified contracts. We will provide you with a requisition packet, which is filled out electronically. And so you would put together the requisition packet with all of your contractor invoices as backup documentation, submit that to us electronically, and then, we here at the iBank, this happens in-house, review these requisitions, and then go ahead and disperse the funds. And we will wire those funds directly, so this, it's a quick process, because we are doing this all in-house. Our disbursements are anywhere from, 2 to 14 days. I don't know that we've ever had one take more than 14 days to disperse. So, if you have not paid your contractors yet, we're getting you this money back in plenty of time to, meet the deadlines for paying your vendors. All right, so this is just also a visual on the project timeline all the way from allocation, and you're going to certify your contract if you're doing design, your closing, your construction, your reimbursements, and then you get down to obviously the project completion. As David mentioned, no payments are due during construction. Once you are construction complete is when we convert your loan to the long-term loan. And obviously, let's say you borrowed $5 million in the short term. If you only end up requisitioning, did I say 5 million? $4 million, then we only convert the $4 million. So you're only being converted for what you've actually drawn. And then obviously your repayments. Okay, so coming soon, a couple things that are not quite up and running. We do have a marine and aviation project financing program. We do not yet have funds appropriated to those projects, but they are, they have already been vetted in our May report. We're just kind of waiting for those funds to be appropriated, but that's going to take care of, anything airport, anything marine, docks, wharves, warehouses, certain those things that are listed up there. So that's coming soon, hopefully. And then coming up in the new fiscal year, we will have a disaster relief financing program called the SAIL program. We have a similar program in water. So this will be in conjunction with the existing FHWA, relief program, kind of giving you access to temporary bridge loans in the aftermath of a disaster, in anticipation of, receiving funds. And I just had a couple FAQs. So, a lot of times people will say, are there time constraints since this is, going through the government, are there burdensome reviews? And our typical project timeline is, 3 to 6 months. It can be sooner if everything is complete and comprehensive. I gotta, give a plug to Brian. He's really good with reviewing plans and specs. You get those back kind of right away because we don't have, we're not federally funded. We don't have to go through the extensive kind of environmental review. So it's a streamlined process, and you can be, you can be done within 3 to 6 months. And then I just actually had this question this week where a potential borrower thought, that you needed to have a project that was, $20 million in order to come through the program. So we want to point out that, we work with projects of all sizes, not $150,000 or less. I think I just learned that this morning. But, our largest project to date that's been allocated is about $12 million. That was a bridge project. And then we had one small project allocated at $450,000. It was for some sidewalks. And I think they were just testing the waters, and actually that borrower has become a repeat borrower where we got a second loan application from them. So loans of all sizes. And that's it.
That small loan was multiple contracts. So even though it was $450,000, you might have had a $200,000 contract within that loan.
Yep. All right, and so that's our contact information. That's me as the project manager, and George Roland, Chief Operating Officer, and we're here to answer any kind of questions and help you along.
Question?
Question?
Some questions from the audience. Must we wait for construction in order to get reimbursed for soft or preliminary costs?
Can you repeat that?
Must we wait for construction in order to get reimbursed for soft or preliminary costs?
No. As long as your contract is certified, so if you have other costs and those contracts are certified, then you can request that reimbursement as you incur those costs.
And by contracts, Melinda means the contracts for your engineering and design. So if the program is certified, those contracts, and we've closed on a short-term loan, we can distribute funds to that design work.
I don't know if I want to
design
add that
contract.
if you're talking about like bond counsel and contingency fees, most of the time borrowers would like to wait until construction is complete, is underway in case there's change order work and you run out of that money, but we can certainly pay them ahead as long as you've got your short-term loan closed.
So George, if you come in for engineering and design, you have a certified contract, and you close a short-term loan, you're gonna have, let's say, $10,000 in legal fees to close that loan. You can certainly come into the program and submit that invoice
Mhm.
and get reimbursed for the $10,000 to
Yes.
pay your lawyer.
Yep, and I don't think
Absolutely.
I don't think I did mention, we do add a contingency buffer. So when you put your estimated costs for your construction, normally it's 10% of the estimated construction costs. We kind of, add a buffer there for those kind of soft costs and, either for overages or for legal fees and that kind of thing.
Right, so we don't want people to pump up their engineer's estimate for cost, because what that does is we set those funds aside, and now those funds cannot be used for other projects because you've highballed your bid. So we put a 10% cushion in there already for any kind of overages or cushions, et cetera. So we really want to try to get people to give us as accurate as an estimate as possible, with the understanding that that could change over time.
Yep.
Let's say delays with, just in terms of delivery of materials and stuff like that, or inflation. People are going to be continuing to come into the program to a certain point and ask for change orders or upsizes.
And I don't think we mentioned anywhere that, if you do run into, you're running towards the end of your allocated money, you can request an increase to your allocation. So let's say you've got change orders that are kind of, like right now, things are very expensive. We have a couple borrowers that it's looking like they're going to run out of what they estimated. You can request an increase to your allocation. The only limitation is it needs to be on the PPL, the project priority list. And so if you request it, we would get it on the next project priority list, and then you can kind of upsize your short-term loan to kind of cover those costs if you need to.
We just need to make sure that your ordinance and
ordinance.
resolutions
Yes.
are set for that dollar amount.
Yep.
So we cannot lend more than what's on the project priority list that we've submitted to the legislature, nor can we lend more than what's on the ordinance and resolutions that were provided to the public.
Yep.
Would we be eligible for the program if we have advertised for bids but have not yet opened the bids?
You can rescind the advertisement, but you can't be going to move forward with opening the bids.
Should I apply now if my project is not scheduled to start construction until 2026?
Absolutely. We have a project that is actually almost ready for allocation, I think, in October, and that application came in, I think, what's that?
3 years ago?
In 2018, I think. It was one of the very first projects that came in.
Bridge.
It was a bridge, and we're almost there. So yeah, you can apply at any time for any kind of project that's in the future. And what we do each quarter before we do our allocations is we reach out to each applicant who has not yet been allocated, and we kind of just confirm, all right, are you still interested in the program? Have your cost estimates changed? Have your timing changed? Has your scope changed? And so we give you an opportunity. I mean, you can do it anytime you want, but we will reach out every quarter towards the end of the quarter to just kind of assess your interest and to make sure the project is, as accurate as possible in the system.
Do I need a local aid grant in order to qualify for this program?
Absolutely not. No, you can come in, like David was just kind of plugging local aid because it does obviously give you the biggest savings, but no, we have plenty of borrowers who are financing the entirety of their projects through the program.
So, George, let me just plug, I think we've got 36 projects that we've allocated or lent money to date. Of those 36 projects, 24 of those projects have been with multiple borrowers. People that have come back for more, repeat borrowers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? So 2/3 of our projects have gone to people that have come in once and have liked the program so much that they've come in for a second or a third, and in one case, a fourth loan from the program.
Our signal and lighting upgrades an eligible project.
They are.
We have
They have a
one,
very big one. Mm-hmm.
total size 10?
I think that,
11?
that's 12, that's 12, they've just asked for a little more money, so,
That's a $12
yeah,
million
it's a
project?
very big, it's a whole redoing of their signaling. So it's a big project, yeah.
Is an EO 215 review required if I am just repairing, repaving a damaged road?
Well, I mean, you have to get the exemption, so it's reviewed, but as I said, it's most likely going to be exempt, especially repairing something that's already there, you're not breaking any, new ground, you're doing something in kind, those kinds of projects are exempt. And also, there is a minimum as far as cost, so if it's a smaller project, it's automatically exempt.
But that's determined
By the
ultimately
DOT.
by the department and
Yes.
the environmental group at the department. And I hear, is Elkins formally retired?
Not yet.
Do you believe so?
Formally retired.
Hasn't- I don't know his last day.
What?
I don't know his last day, but
Yeah,
it's official.
big
It's
loss.
happening.
Yeah.
Great man.
Oh, yeah, we have good reviewers over there, and so everything is looked at, but most projects are just getting the exemption. And it's nothing you have to do as the borrower, they take the plans and specs or the application from NJ Moves, do the review, and, we just kind of say, okay, you're exempt.
I believe we answered this one already. Can we finance professional advisor fees such as bond counsel?
Yes.
The answer is yes. And then the last one, do we have to convert to long-term financing, or can we just utilize the short-term program to finance for, say, 1 to 2 years?
Just utilize this.
Yep.
Okay? But I'm telling you, once you do, you're gonna like us so much that you will start long-term financing projects that you're gonna finance.
Can David
So,
be heard? Okay.
by all means, come in and use us just for short-term financing. Get your feet wet, see if you like the program enough.
And that's it.
Okay.
I believe we can start the,
Okay.
Breakouts.
So-
yep.
All right, so just for logistics, for people that are joining us in the webinar, again, go to our website. There's a streamer up there. It'll give you the links, the Teams links for whether you want to join, and you've got legal questions, or you've got operational questions, or you have finance questions. The legal group's going to be managed by our Assistant Director and Chief Legal and Compliance Officer, Judy Karp. She'll be joined by Dorit Kressel from CSG. You're going to, for the people that are here that want to go into legal, you're going to be in a small conference room. For the finance folks, you're going to be joined by myself and our CFO, Lauren Kaltman. For people that are here that want to be in that's going to be in the Executive Director's office, which is just the other side of this wall. And for anybody that's interested in the operational piece, you're going to be joined by Brian Wirtz of the department, as well as Melinda Roslin and our COO, George Roland. Stay here in this boardroom. Okay? I would say just, give us 5 minutes to kind of get set up. So maybe around 2:50 or 2:51, is when we'll be calling in and getting our computer set up on Teams. So if you're on hold for a little bit, just bear with us. Okay? All right. Thank you, everybody.